Um, yeah, so I don't have all the answers. I'm trying to struggle through this myself, but I thought just to even put some points to paper might be a bit helpful for other businesses who are also trying to navigate this. Okay, so first thing that I think there is a lot of confusion out there, just in terms of what businesses had to close and what businesses could remain open. I think that confusion exists among the business community as well as the general public. So really the province only mandated that a certain number of industries had to close or had to make severe changes in how they're operating. All of these, this information is going to be available at the end, so you don't need to take pictures of the slides, Stuart, just if that's what you were doing. We will be sharing all of this information at the end of the call. So basically, they never said that non-essential businesses had to close in BC. And across other provinces, they certainly have mandated that, but that has never been the case in BC. And I think that also contributes to the confusion. So technically, if we're not in a must-close industry, we can be open. But a lot of us chose to close down for a number of different reasons. And I even heard this today, there's definite mixed feelings from the customers, there's mixed feelings from the staff, and also the business owners is what's our next step? How are we supposed to proceed through this? And like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I think as in anything, we need to plan. Just like when you're starting your business from the beginning, you need a business plan. You need to think through things and how is it going to work? Well, I don't think we're in any different position right now. I think it's a very important time to plan. So starting with that, I think a risk assessment is the number one thing that you need to do. So what is the risks, the potential hazards that you're facing by opening? Who could be harmed? What's the likelihood of that happening? And what are the ramifications? The other part of risk assessment is also knowing how to mitigate or having a plan to mitigate those concerns. So on the risk mitigation, we've got the guidelines that are being put out by WorkSafe BC and by the province of BC. Now, when you drill into those sections, they do have some guidelines that are specific for industries, but not all industries are covered off in those guidelines. For example, there's nothing for just a general retail store outside of retail grocery. But I would suggest that if you're following the retail grocery guidelines, you're going to meet or exceed any requirements for your facility. Now, the other thing with the risk mitigation is how are you going to deal with all of these things? So we need to know the rules, but then what's our protocol? How are we going to develop this? And including in that, we need to make sure that our staff are trained on the new protocols. We need to think about all the different things that could happen. A lot of small business owners, we don't have any kind of policies or procedures, and now's the time where you're going to need to create policies and procedures for staff if you don't have them already. So even things like travel, when your employee takes a vacation, are they going to have to quarantine for 14 days when they return? I mean, that's the current rule. If they're leaving the country, right? So we need to start thinking about all of these things and making sure that we've built them into our business model when we're ready to reopen. So it's not going to be business as usual, and it's not going to be business as usual for the long haul. We really need to sit down and take some note of just the changes in consumer patterns that we're seeing. There's a lot of disruption happening. So from the retail point of view, from the consumer buying patterns, from even their wants and needs are changing or have changed due to this COVID situation. So what's that going to look like for your particular business? Before you even think about opening, you need to dig into your supply chains. Do they still exist? Is there going to be issues? I know, just speaking from my own personal experience, we bring a lot of product up through the States, and that's severely impacting our ability to move forward, because if we go down across the line to pick up orders, we could, because we are considered an essential service, but what does that mean in terms of isolation when we get back? Okay, so it's all things that we need to think about. I always like to follow the money, follow the numbers, and so cash flow budget scenarios are really, really important this time. Or at this time, and I think you really need to take a varied look at those cash flow budgets. You can't just assume that it's going to be business as normal. You want to create pessimistic projections, you want to create an optimistic projection, and you want to create something that's in the middle of those. So these are just suggested guidelines here: 35% reduction, 12 months for recovery to start. And probably in any of these situations, we're probably looking at another 12 months on top of it to return to somewhat normal levels. So staffing is another huge issue of concern for us as we're thinking about coming back to business. And again, I think you need to look at your staffing requirements based on those 3 different scenarios. So one of the things that I would be doing is really basically taking stock or inventory of the staff, what kind of skill sets that they have, who am I going to need in the short term, who am I going to need in a longer term, what kind of skill sets need to be filled immediately versus longer. We need to create some kind of a staff recall plan. We also need, as business owners, we need to recognize that some of our employees are not going to be able to return to work due to other circumstances that are in their life. Chronic medical conditions, children not being able to access daycare. It makes it impossible for some people to just say, yeah, I can come to work tomorrow. There's extenuating circumstances happening for all of us. We also need to consider, as business owners, the provincial labor standards and how is that going to impact. So there has been a slight change that was announced, and that is to extend the layoff period from a normal 13 weeks to 16 weeks due to COVID. So if that's why you had to lay off your staff, then you don't have to worry about having to issue severance or anything until after the 16-week period is over. Big concern is, am I going to have sufficient cash flow to meet the payroll obligations? And you should be darn sure that you've got that money sitting there prior to you bringing the staff back on. So any of these wage subsidy programs are all reimbursement programs. So you're going to have to be able to pay the full wages of the staff people before they walk in the door. It's going to be a long time before you will be able to return to your pre-COVID staffing levels for most of us. Some of you may bounce back a little quicker, but not everybody's going to bounce back. So you need to really think about that in terms of your cash flow, in terms of who you need, what staff skill sets you need, all of that. So I think the staffing is really, really a critical part of your planning. And last but not least, I think a communications plan is very essential here. Your staff really look to you as the leader of the organization, and they're looking to you for some sense of calm, some sense of plan or a way that we're all going to move forward through this situation. So having open, honest, transparent communication with your staff is really, really critical. And on an external side, I think our marketing messages absolutely are going to be changed for the future. Our customers need to know that we are open for business, but that their safety is top of mind. And they need to know what we're doing to keep them safe. I also think it's going to be really important to market alternative ways to obtain the goods and services, because there will be a large portion of the population that will not be comfortable returning to business as normal. So that's, I think, all I got on that end.